Welcome to the Miscarriage Rebellion. I am Stacey June Lewis, lead of the Pink Elephant Support Network group counselling program, Grief and Grace. And along with Pink Elephant's co-founder and CEO Sam Payne, through this podcast we will share the stories of many Australians who have lost their babies to early pregnancy loss. With evidence and empathy, we unpack the shame, blame and stigma and lack of support that they may face. This is a loss that has been silenced for far too long, and we deserve better. We are here to normalise the conversation and to make lasting change. So we are sitting here on a Monday morning on a cold Melbourne day, and I'm sitting here with two wonderful women, Hinda and Zahra. Zahra is here to interpret the conversation that I'm to have with Hinda. Zahra works at a place called East AfriCare, which I really am excited to hear about soon, Zahra. And Hinda comes from lived experience, so having experienced her own pregnancy loss, and wants to also talk about advocacy and give us some information on what it really means to lose a baby in her community, and share some stories that she has so delicately held on behalf of friends and other people in her community. So it gives us greater context as to what this experience looks like across our country. So thanks for being here, ladies.
Thank you for that.
So, Zahra, can you tell us a little bit about, firstly, what East AfriCare does and your relationship with Hinda? And then Hinda and I will continue the conversation. And thank you so much for being here to interpret it for us.
Thank you for having us here this morning. So East AfriCare is a program that helps women that are going through miscarriage, specifically women the background of East African, including Somali, Sudanese, Eritrean, Ethiopian. So we try and find and help the women who don't have access to healthcare, who don't speak the language, who are immigrants, who are new to the country, who are ignorant to the symptoms that are going through and who need a lot of help. And also, there's also another taboo with going through miscarriages in these communities, being shamed, you can't talk about them, and a lot of it to do with culture and not having that support within each other, to the extent where they can't even acknowledge or address if they're pregnant, that they have to hide it until the pregnancy shows, and then they feel comfortable showing it. So miscarriage is an extremely big taboo in those backgrounds. So we're trying to bring awareness and educate them and provide support in those specific background women. Okay. And I'm a registered nurse as well / midwife that worked in the hospital for the last several years. So yeah, I provide consultations with those women. I educate them when they need help, symptoms, provide them reassurance, making them normalizing this. And Hinda she was one of the participants as well. Yeah.
Okay. So Hinda, thanks so much for being here and sharing your story, and I am so sorry for your loss. Could you tell us a little bit about your experience with early pregnancy loss and why you feel it's important to share your story?
So she said she experienced her first miscarriage while she was 3 months, and she went to the hospital and they sent her home, and she had a lot of blood loss, and she's been going back to the hospital back and forth because I think it was a threatened miscarriage, to the point that she was in so much pain, and she told them, I just want to get over done with, like I want all of it to come out. And they told her, you need to go home and wait. And she said, I came home and waited, and there was a lot of blood loss, a lot of pain, and that she felt like her family, her kids were neglected, and obviously she didn't have the capacity, whether it's mentally or physically, to take care of them. And there's just a lot of little support as well, especially when you're only two parent, her husband working full time, so it's only her at home with other 3 or 4 kids. So yeah, she said it took a while going back forth hospital and home to finally to complete the process. So she said she's sharing this because there's a lot of women in her situation, or even worse in her situation, that the most important thing being when you are going through that process, getting the support that you need, because you have other kids in the home, you have got family in the home that are being neglected, that you don't have the capacity to take care of. And she's saying there has to be more awareness and more support in the community.
And Hinda, if you were to receive more support and someone was to say, okay, we'll come and give that to you, what would that look like? What would have been helpful for you?
She said, I think the biggest support in that moment would be being able to contact someone for support. And then the other second thing would be having community or somewhere where you can call or contact them to sort of with the kids. She said, when I went to the hospital and I took the kids, the hospital has to be quiet. You can't bring kids. You have to have certain number. You need to take the kids back. And she said, obviously, there's only one parent. The other person has to work. So she said that's one of the biggest struggle, because there's just very limitation in support, and it would be a lot helpful if there is a way where they could access daycare for those particular women who cannot afford to pay for the daycare as well.
Yeah, it's such an important point, because I think sometimes when we hear stories about pregnancy loss, it is obviously a harrowing loss, and the feelings it is, bringing up in you is one element. And then there's a logistical element of how you can even begin to process that, because you're still working through physicality. You're actually still, going through the physical symptoms of a loss. And then you also have other children. So I'm sorry that was just so challenging for you. In terms of how it felt for you and how you're feeling about this experience, where are you currently at with where it's sitting, and how is that recognized or acknowledged within your home or your community?
She said as far as how she's doing, now she's in a better place. But she said it's different when you're financially not in a great position. She said you can't even afford, or you don't have the capacity to think about yourself or your healing or your pain. Even though you're in so much pain, you're thinking about, how am I feeding these kids? How am I going to afford to get someone to take care of them when I'm at the hospital? She said I was never a priority for myself or my healing or my pain. Even though I was losing a lot of blood, she was in a lot of pain. But she said my priorities, it was different. She said she went back to the hospital for an ultrasound, and that day she took them to the daycare. She's been taking them while she was going to the hospital, and she only used to take them when she's working, and when she's not working, she will have them at home. But for now, because she's been on and off hospital, she took them. And then while she was in ER, she received a text saying that, your hours are finished. From now on, you're going to have to pay the full amount. So she said, in that instant, I'm not even worrying about myself being at the hospital and being in pain. I'm worrying about, how am I paying this? I do not work. I do not have money. Who's going to take care of them? What are they going to eat? So she said, in that moment, I'm not even thinking about myself, or I'm not a priority to think about. It's a privilege to think about my healing and how I'm going to be okay. That's one thing. So she said that's one of the biggest problem and issues. And she said she took herself to an ultrasound that day, and she managed to find a family member or a person to take care of the kids. And they told her, we're going to change your appointment to tomorrow. And she said, I can't, because I managed to find somebody and I can't afford to take them to daycare. And they told her, no, you can bring them tomorrow if they're going to strictly sit down and be quiet and don't scream. And she said, I've got 2-year-old and 4-year-old. They're not going to sit down quietly. So she was like, and the cost was 700, but I don't have the 700. Where am I going to get this? So she said, I don't even have time to prioritize or heal when I'm worried about how am I going to pay this and how am I going to pay my bills.
That's so profound to say that healing is a privilege. And I think it's a really important part of this picture is that when we do talk about yourself, that it is really one of those elements of a secondary thought. And yeah, I'm just kind of sitting in awe of the fact that you went through that. And
I think you heal when you don't like, let's say if you have a bigger problems, like as far as having a roof, having food, your electricity paid, and then you can worry and say, okay, am I okay? Can I heal? My kids have food. But when you're worrying about the necessity, the last thing on your mind is how am I going to heal, because you don't even have the necessity. Yeah, she said also her husband works full time, but he doesn't have a sick leave or annual leave. And if he misses one day of work, he loses that pay for the day. And so then they would not afford like to pay for the rent or for the grocery. So she said it's just very
loaded.
Yeah,
there's a lot of
loaded.
things to consider.
Exactly.
It's not simple.
Yeah.
And that is a really interesting element, because the question I asked sounded like a simple question. So I thank you for showing the colour and the complexity of an answer like that for yourself. I want to ask about your supports around emotionally, and if there was someone that you confided in for yourself in that time. As you've said, there were obviously elements of this picture that didn't have great capacity for you to be thinking of anything. But is this a conversation you could have with your husband? Was it a conversation that you did have eventually with a friend? Was there someone that you had to talk to this about? Or is this a conversation point that's difficult with yourself or within your community?
She said she shared it with 2 or 3 friends that also went through the same like experiences, and some of them have been worse than me. So she said that sort of put things in perspective.
So is there any stories, because I know that you have been talking to a lot of different women across this experience since you have experienced yours, and I think you both have worked together with different people in groups capacities on this particular point. But are there things that you can share that give us a bit of a bird's eye view, like it kind of comes out and lets us see what other experiences could be happening in your community that do differ to yours and that potentially have given you perspective or could give us perspective on the variety of experiences of early pregnancy loss for women in your community?
She said, yeah, she said, I'm comfortable sharing different experiences that I went through in the community. I am not here just for me, and I'm not here only to share my story. I also want to share it relevant to people that are worse than me. He would go back home to Somalia and get married and then come back. Well, the husband resides in that country. And then let's say she even had kids prior before marrying him. And then when she comes back now, she's, even if that's her first child and she goes through miscarriage, she's completely like alone and isolated in that house. At least for the people that are married, they would have the husband to come home, and then the husband would help them for like emotional or any other support. She said some of them actually don't even drive. So it's just, that person just went through miscarriage. She goes to the hospital. She gets sent home. And now you're completely alone by yourself. There's no husband. There's no financial support. You can't work because you are bleeding and you're in pain. And it's just completely them. So she said those people need a lot of support more than anything, especially if they had prior children, whether it's emotional support, whether it is when they go to the hospital, maybe they refer them to social work, and a little bit, that's also a language barrier to talk to those women. So yeah, I think particularly those women would need a lot more support because they're just completely isolated and are alone.
And what is the community, well, your community's relationship with early pregnancy loss from a religious or kind of spiritual, cultural perspective? How is it seen? What is this experience, and is there particular meaning or ritual?
She said the women themselves acknowledge, obviously, the experiences because they're the one going through it and the pain, and they talk to amongst themselves, like obviously not the men. And she said some of them even say a woman who never experienced miscarriage do not give birth. It doesn't matter if you have 18 children because the pain is not the same as experiencing the loss of that child. So she said, yes, they do acknowledge it amongst themselves and they talk about it amongst themselves. And yeah, to some extent for the people who have friends, I think they do support each other amongst themselves. It's just the ones that don't have that connection to other people or don't have friends or don't have any other women.
Okay, so let me just get this clear if I've heard correctly. So what I'm hearing is the isolation is less about it being a cultural kind of shunned topic and taboo topic, but it's more about the isolation and the barriers of the community in the way the way that life is here. So essentially, if you do find yourself isolated, not able to work, don't speak the language,
not necessarily like openly talking about it, but like discreetly, yes, this happened to me, can you help me? So it's like something that's discreet. So she said it is a very big taboo, and that's why we're trying to having workshops and to talk about it amongst each other and make it more normalized. But it's not something that's very openly discussed. They acknowledge it, they experience it, they help each other if they can, or just within their own in a very like discreet way.
Right. So the connection has been there for you, but it was kind of almost on secret. So it's almost like this secret type of club, essentially, that it's, it's something that isn't openly discussed.
Yeah,
but
they're not as comfortable to openly share what they went through or what miscarriage is. Yeah.
So why is it taboo? What is it? What does it mean in this culture, in this community, to experience an early pregnancy loss, to give a really clear picture on why is it so private? So for example, like in society, the story goes in terms of a more generalized cultural society here, from my understanding and perspective, personally, is that early pregnancy loss can be seen as not a real baby or not a real loss, that it was early, so it might not mean anything, or lucky you can fall pregnant, or there's a lot of attitudes around diminishing the validity of the experience. So that's an example of why it's kind of looked upon as taboo from my perspective. In a bigger culture perspective, I'm interested to know if there's like specific, as you say, taboo elements in your culture or in your community.
She said maybe the first month or so, or 2 months, if the miscarriage, the first month, the first month, if it passes, then that would be maybe minimized and be like, okay, you're not as in pain, or you're not experiencing, or you just, you don't have a lot of pain, you don't lose a lot of blood, so it's very early on. It could be minimized and say it's fine, like, it's not a big deal because it's still early on. But she said once it hits 2-3 months, for the women that experience miscarriage, she said, we acknowledge it and we know it, so we support each other in that case. And as far as the men, obviously not full hands-on, but they are aware of it. And I'm not sure about this to the extent of the support that they get from the husband. She said we do share, like, with friends. Obviously, like, families know if it's up to the 3 months mark, so they do share amongst each other and say, yes, that person went through miscarriage because the baby's gone. So that's something that we have to share. She said is to some extent, if it's like, depending on how what month of the pregnancy is. It could be minimized in the early on, but she said if it's like in the middle and you're depending on how much pain and you're experiencing a lot of pain and a lot of blood loss, then you're sick. So then we would share.
Right. So a lot of it can be gauged on the physical symptoms. That's essentially so the severity or the kind of more
because
how serious it's taken is how you're physically presenting.
Yeah.
Okay. And what about kind of religiously, spiritually, is there a belief system particularly of your own? You don't have to speak on behalf of the community where is this to you how do you see the baby that you lost? What is your spiritual religious connection to this baby that came and unfortunately didn't?
Yeah. She said as far as religious wise, it's up to God. Like the way she looks at it is that God gave me and God took it away.
Okay, thank you. That gives me lovely context. So I've just got a couple more questions. One of them is, what would you think would be a culturally sensitive approach to this experience? So the specifics of what you needed and what the women in your life needed to support this experience better. And I don't mean which it could be in the logistics and the things that you've said, but is there specific things for the system or the people around you that are supposed to be there to support?
So she said when I went through the miscarriage process and I was being discharged from the hospital, there was a lot of support. They came to me. They said, we're sorry for your loss. They gave me information who to contact and if I need extra support, who to talk to. She said at the end, a particular person came and gave me a candle and some ritual, and they were like, oh, you can light this candle and then it will sort of use it as like a healing, or just light it and use it. And she said, oh, if you see a Muslim woman, whether it's my background or not, like more religious wise, we don't believe in spiritual. So she said that made me very uncomfortable. It's more of a religion thing. I believe in God, and God gave me the child and he took it away, and I'm thankful for that. Like that was his plan. That's it. So she said that sort of is uncomfortable, and that's one thing that I would want for them not to do.
Interesting. Yeah.
For Muslim women, she said maybe it's fine obviously for other backgrounds. She said I can't speak for that, but my religion, her religion doesn't allow that. So she said that's
almost offensive or almost not a misunderstanding.
Uncomfortable. Yeah, she said I wouldn't want that. I don't believe in lighting candles or ritual or anything like that. Like
Okay. Yeah, that's really, really interesting, because I certainly felt that there was a misrepresentation. That's interesting. Okay. And so that's really helpful. And is there anything else like that in those instances that you feel like would be useful, even to think about the women that you have shared this experience with, something that they feel like they would want others to know?
She said there's one of the other things was that happened to her when she is going through the process. Obviously, she needs an interpreter. And she said other medical conditions, I'm completely fine with any interpreter, whether it's a female or a male. But she said when it's a miscarriage, I'm more vulnerable and I need a woman by my side. So she said they call a man who is also from her background, the Somali man. So, and then he would look at me and say, what do you want me to talk about? And she said, then I don't feel 100% myself or comfortable to even share what I want to share. First, he speaks my language, and secondly, he's from my own community. So she said, so that's something I do not want.
So it's a situation that calls for what's comfortable, which is often women understanding women's experiences.
Yeah.
Okay.
Like sharing that with a man is,
Is anything to do with intimate kind of women's, whether that's menstrual cycle, miscarriage, intimacy, is that across the board, or is it specifically this miscarriage that feels particularly
sensitive?
She said, if it's my doctor, and obviously she said it's fine whether it's a female or a male, it's fine because he's my doctor. But she said when it comes to interpreter, anything to do with women, like intimate women, medical issues, miscarriage, period, anything, if there is a man is trying to interpret in Somali, she said, I don't know what to talk about. So I prefer women
withhold information.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which can be unsafe, really,
yeah, so she
and
said,
dangerous.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, well, that's fairly important, I would think. Thank you so much for sharing. I just want to make sure I haven't missed anything. And I guess, Zelda, I want to just give you the opportunity before we wrap up, Hinda, to also, I don't know, just give us your take on this particular experience and what your observation of what we're missing, like in this conversation in regards to East African women, but particularly in this instance, we're talking about the Somalian, well, Hinda's experience, but we are talking a little bit further on women that she is talking to in her community who are Somali.
I think every woman has a different experience, a different background. Hinda, she has a very positive experience as far as not being taboo, able to share with family, friends, able like to share that pain, which is amazing. But one of my participants, depending on like what they've experienced, especially if it's like miscarriage out of marriage, that's one thing that is really big on, because you can't even share you're pregnant because you're not married, let alone experiencing it now, because it's forbidden in the religion. So that's something that you'll be isolated, and you will shun yourself, because then you did a bad thing, you're a bad person. So yeah, that's one of
quite a serious, dangerous element of this.
Serious, yeah.
And in terms of how we can support those women, I mean, how do you guys go about that situation as terms of yourself and an organisation? And then how would you say as a society we can better support that experience if it is so isolating and private?
I think I only have one participant who shared that with me, and that happened I think 2 years ago. Till this day she never shared it with anyone, not with her mum, not with her sister, completely nobody but herself. So I was the only person that she was willing to share that with me, with the promise of me not sharing her name. So yeah, it's something that we talked about, and she's healing from it now, even though it's been like such a long time. But as far as I would like to know more women who go through those similar situations, because I feel like they're more vulnerable when it comes to that, and they need a lot more support, a lot more openness, because then they don't have family support. I think there's a particular story that I want to share about one of at the workshop that we talked about. And I was happy to hear that she was comfortable enough to talk about it amongst other women. So we did a workshop with Somali Voice in Heidelberg, which we brought women together sharing stories of their own, which sort of creates that networking and makes them comfortable. And it's healing as well when women sit down and have conversation about their experiences. It really is healing. So it was similar experiences that Hinda talked about. It goes more into mental health as well, which is a little bit, I think, taboo in our community. Mental health as in like depression or anxiety or seeing a therapist. She came to this country, I think she's been here just for fairly new. She's got 7 kids. She experienced around 4 miscarriages, and she did go to the GP, but every time it was the same results because of a language barrier. She didn't understand, or it wasn't beneficial information as she shared. And then the 5th miscarriage, he told her, while you keep having kids, you shouldn't be getting pregnant because your iron's so low, it's very dangerous. And she said, I sort of, why wouldn't you tell me the last 4 miscarriages that my iron level was too low, and you're sharing this with me now after I've been struggling, and this is my 5th miscarriage. And she talked about how some of the practices are not as helpful, and not a single GP or the one that she was going to did a thorough health check or blood levels, which is very like basic and vital. As soon as you have a miscarriage, you've lost a lot of blood, you do your iron check, blood levels.
Well, you do everything. It sometimes if you do a generic health check.
Correct.
Yeah.
She says she didn't have that. It took her to lose 4 kids for her to get checked, her blood levels, to be told your body needs time to heal. You're unwell medically and unfit medically while you keep trying. And she said, there was no support, there was no effort, there was also a language barrier, and she just felt numb. And it's also lacking that, like being ignorant and not knowing, not having education. She said he told me to take some vitamins. She said I bought them and I couldn't even read what they're for. I don't know who to tell me what these vitamins are for or how many times I need to take. Just simple things like that. So when she was sharing that, like, I got emotional. I thought that was really, really, really sad. And she said, I will tell every woman that comes to this country, please do not get married and don't have children for the first 2 years until you know the basics
of how to
the other women. Yeah, because she did struggle. Yeah. Okay. And then she shared and said, if this program had been around, or you had been around, it would have been more beneficial for me, because obviously some of the consultations that we provide, I go to their homes, just sitting her down and just the basics, talking about it. So you've lost a lot of blood. How are you feeling? What did your GP say? Did you do bloods? Can you ask him to do bloods, check on you? I'm more than happy to make appointments. I'm more than happy to read the vitamins that you need to take. Like I'm saying, even that small little health, it might be overlooked, but it's extremely essential and important, because it took her 4 miscarriages that she didn't have to experience. And I think even, women that speak the language can often miss really basic elements of this experience. But I can't even imagine what it would be like to then have a GP constantly trying to focus on the fact that they can't understand each other. So there would have to be a bias in missing information or missing basic, as you say, human checks and human rights, because they're so focused on the fact that there is not the same language being spoken. So then all of these other elements are missed in those, as you say, basic checks that can come from just, I've been feeling a little tired. Okay, let's do all of these bloods. Whereas something like this, which is quite a severe experience to go through, let's be honest. Yeah, absolutely.
And it isn't always, but for many of us it is, to then not have a real thorough health check and to be able to expect that from a healthcare professional in the context of whether you speak the language or not.
Yeah, she just felt unheard. She felt overlooked because she didn't know the language. She felt like she wasn't educated, so she was overlooked and unheard. And she just felt like it shouldn't have gotten to this point where I had to experience a 5th one to be told my iron's low. It should have done it on the first one. And she said, I don't have the education. I can't read or write. So it's just quite sad hearing that.
Yeah, which I'm sure contributes to mental health challenges if you feel like you can't advocate for yourself, you can't look after yourself, you don't understand what's required, or you miss something, which we can all feel. But if you feel like you also don't have the capacity to learn more in this country, that now you're out of control, and you're feeling really vulnerable is probably not even the word for it, but really scared.
Yeah, I also think basic education can go far. She talked about how she didn't even know she needed to wait certain time to conceive again and to let your body heal. Informations like that are very vital to these women, and some of them don't have that education from this and certain backgrounds. So that's also very important. And we were discussing that
to not assume the knowledge.
Absolutely. Yeah. She expressed that. She said, I had no idea I even needed to wait for 3 months because I was just kept having the next and the next, because the GP didn't educate her. He didn't even do the vital the basics checks with her. So yeah, she mentally, physically, it takes a toll on you. And 4 in a row, as you can imagine, I can't even imagine. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. That's really important.
She said she was born in Somalia and she came here when she was 18 and got married at 19 to a guy who's from back home, Somalia. And she brought him here. No, she didn't bring him here. So sorry. She went there, married him, came back pregnant. And she said she didn't have anywhere to stay.
Today's episode may have brought up some feelings that you need some extra support around, and that's totally okay. Head to pinkelephants.org.au to access our circle of support, your space where you can be met with empathy and support through all of your experiences of early pregnancy loss. We're here for you. You're not alone.